guys, welcome back to my channel, The Inked Reader. Today I am wrapping up the books I've read in the month of May, which was absolutely fantastic. I think thus far has been the best reading month of the whole year, and a lot of 5 stars, and I honestly hope that next month's will be as good, but I've got a feeling that this month is gonna be the best, it's gonna stay the best. But yeah, hopefully I am wrong. I'm gonna touch upon the few things I didn't get around to, and I have been a bit cheeky because this month this shelf that is destroyed behind me is the one that actually came up, but because many of those I'd already read, I picked up some books from there which I had swapped previously, so I didn't think the green books had a fair chance. But I ended up basically reading all the green books and almost none of the ones from the actual shelf that was the pick of the month. So yeah, I've been a bit cheeky, but it's okay. I had an amazing time, so I don't care. Very quickly, things I didn't even start. Kingslayer, you can go back. Red Queen, didn't even open any of those books. Jane Eyre, I'm sorry, I wasn't in a mood for a classic, and so I didn't pick this up because I want to give this a fair chance. And finally, I didn't read Princess Gambit either. So those are the only 4 books I've not read. There are a few that I'm in the middle of that I'm carrying over in June and finishing hopefully in June. So before we get into the 13 things I have read, I think this month is very important for me to reiterate that the list that I am compiling now is only purely in terms of enjoyment and this month of how addictive the book was, because I had a few 5 stars, and quality wise, probably this list, actually not probably, this list quality wise, if I had to sit and think about the plot, the writing, was being crafted here, this list would be very, very different. At least the first places would basically be swapped, and definitely probably the first choice would be at the bottom of quality overall. However, I do want to stick with me putting these on an enjoyment, pure enjoyment scale, if it makes sense. And so yeah, this is what it looks like. These, I do not though want you to think that I think that the first choice is, for example, a literature masterpiece compared to the third choice, because it's not. I do recognize that quality wise the first choice probably would be at the bottom or similar, but I don't care. I add a lot of emotions with a bunch of these books, and the emotions and the investment I had in the stories is what drives this list when I compile it. Because there are a lot of books in here, I'm just gonna tell you the genre, but I did give you synopsis for most of them in my TBRs, so I'm not gonna repeat myself in here unless I didn't mention the book in the TBR. So number 13, we have Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerry Maniscalco. This is a historical fiction retelling of a girl having to solve Jack the Ripper mysteries, murders. Miss Maniscalco, what went wrong? This can also be taken on in the right way though, because her subsequent series was 1,000 times better than this, in my opinion. So this one though, no, really didn't work for me. People said this is like a slow, angsty romance. Where did we read the same thing? Because they pine after each other immediately, like so bland, so boring, so heavy. I'm not like the other girls, which in this context, because the historical context where women weren't studying medicine and dissecting bodies, it was very easy to do. Just say I'm not like the other women. Was very heavy-handed in these, and after these I can for sure say Jack the Ripper retellings are not for me. Are really not for me, and I'm giving up on them, okay? This was the last try, and nope. I think her characters also weren't nearly as interesting as, you know, the series what is called? Kingdom of Wicked series, where the ward, of course, it's a historical situation in London and it wasn't that fleshed out. And although I can't spoil things because I don't think it would be fair, I really feel an urge to do so I can bash this properly, because how the mystery is solved, who done it, was so far-fetched. I did write a short review. It's not a review, but I did write something on Goodreads which is a bit spoilery, so if you have read this already or you're not, don't care, you can just read that. Was absolutely bullshit. 2 stars, 2.5 stars. I'm not gonna continue with the series. I am selling these. And I would love to say, oh, if you are interested in Jack the Ripper and you like the retelling, you could read these, but I hate them all. So at number 12 we have a Foxglove King. This was a beautiful, stunning interlude release from a couple of months ago. I've done an unboxing of this if you're interested. And this is a romantic fantasy, however you want to call it. I would call it a YA fantasy masked as an adult fantasy because the characters are past 20. And I believe I gave a synopsis in my Fairy unboxing. However, to be very quick, you follow a girl. She was born in the catacombs and she fled a kind of cult that was trying to use her for dark purposes, and now she's been living on the run, running poisons, because poisons in this world allow you to postpone death, something of a sort. And then she's caught and the king says you can either help us or you can be executed, or, you know, sent in exile in this island where you basically die. And so she of course accepts to work with the king to basically mask what's happening to different villages, that all people living in the villages, they die all of a sudden. So she needs to find out why these people are dying. Clearly poison is involved. She's a poison runner. She's got also some necromancy powers, so she is the perfect one for the job, and she will have to team up with a priest and the prince that is due to inherit the throne. So that's a basic premise, and I must say that this was an unfortunate case because I think the author had a good idea with this. However, the execution was poor, and I honestly do think that this was due to the writing. I mentioned that I wanted to check out the other series by her, which is this one, but I don't think I'm gonna do it because in this case I really honestly think that her writing is not for me, and therefore I think I don't want to check out, at least not now, because it doesn't matter how good the plot is. If you can manage to take such an interesting premise with actually nice characters like to follow and make it dull like this was, you are probably not an author for me. For me it was dull. I'm not saying that it would be for everyone, but this was very much a letdown, unfortunately. I don't have much else to say apart from it was boring and it shouldn't have been. Speaking of unfortunately boring for me, I have If Beale Street Could Talk. This is a literature fiction modern classic actually, and this was one of the 2 book club picks that we're about to discuss today. After I'm filming this, I'm heading off to my book club, and this was the pick for the month. And it's basically this young girl finds herself pregnant and her partner is in prison for a rape that he did not commit, and so she tries to basically get him out of prison before the baby is born with the help of the families. Now this tackles very important topics, and I do want to say that the themes that are tackled in these are indeed extremely important. And again, this is another one where the execution didn't work for me. I found this extremely boring and dull, and the fact that it was exploring themes which I'm quite passionate about. I do like, for example, reading non-fiction about them, or even other books I've loved that had similar themes. This one, somehow the way the plot developed, if you even could call it a plot, it was so slow, character driven in a sense, but all of the characters didn't click with me. And also it's definitely a product of its time. For example, there is the beating up of a woman in this and no one says anything, but again this takes place in the 50s, I don't remember. So I do understand the context in which this was written and what was acceptable at the time or not. So apart from that thing that really stood out to me because it was like, oh, okay, this is not addressed at all. It's just they just let him beat up his wife, and that's okay apparently. But apart from that thing that stood out to me because of those reasons, as I said, nothing else stood out. It has an open ending, and I think I would have loved to know before because I would have got myself a bit more ready for it. This is the kind of open ending that I really dislike, and I do though know that there is a movie of this, and I might check out the movie instead because I know that the movie has a slightly different ending, and I do believe that if a movie is done well, the slow pace of these could be translated well in a visual format. At number 10, I do have Cultish. This is a non-fiction book that I found on Scribd and just listened to it. It was pretty short. And this is the author exploring cultish culture, especially nowadays, and how cults can come in different shapes and forms. And I really enjoyed this overall. It was very, very informative, especially when it comes down to the language that it's integrated in everyday society that we might use and actually does stem from cultish traditions or cultish language. That was extremely fascinating. I also really appreciated how we explore different kinds of cults and how she really shows how they can come and how sneaky they can be. And I do have some experience with Amway when I was a young woman trying to reach out to me and some of my friends and just kind of getting us into it. I remember me really fighting them off to a point that then we didn't go anywhere, thank God. I'm very grateful for that. So he also kind of called to personal things to me that I had experienced. So that was very, very cool to explore. I have to say that because of the length of these, many things were touched upon, delved into, but not deeply, because I understand she wanted to, you know, pack a lot of stuff inside this book. I also have to say one thing that didn't rub me in the wrong way, but I thought she maybe would have been nice to also explore that part of it. When she speaks about cults that has to do with fitness, she never addressed the biology behind exercising and why people actually might find exercising or exercising with other people they're addicting, because when you exercise you release happy hormones in your brain, so you will feel better. Science tells us that when we do exercise, a certain amount of hormones of different genera that do promote better mood, if you want, or more energy are released in our brain. So the fact that so many people exercise to a point that now some exercise culture have become cultish, it's also linked to probably like an addiction that comes with just feeling more happy because of what the brain does when we exercise. So I just thought she should have looked at the biology of it and at how also like doing exercise in a social setting is also even more rewarding than doing on your own. There is a whole science behind that, and you can find millions of studies that have been replicated and everything. So yeah, I just thought she should have been a bit more scientific on it, because it's just not a cult, it's just something that people do because generally it has positive effect on the brain. These can lead, I understand, to cultish behaviors which are probably problematic, but there is also an healthy element to it when it comes down to exercise and exercising group, which I wish she had addressed more, basically. Yeah, I'm gonna cut it out here, but yeah, it was very informative though, and I would recommend these in general. Okay, then I have SPQR. Okay, so these, I debated to put these on number 9, 8 or vice versa, so the next two are pretty equal in terms of enjoyment. I did enjoy this non-fiction about the history of Rome a lot. However, I do also have some issues with it because it took me ages and ages to read these, and it doesn't take me ages to read non-fiction. I devour non-fiction usually. Yes, this is very dense, but I think that there was something about the way it was done that didn't work that well for me, despite me absolutely admiring the research that the author put into this. This is a life work, because she explores the history of Rome, the city, in a way that probably has never been done in a non-fiction of this kind of, and I found it remarkably well informed, remarkably fascinating just to learn everything, all single aspects of Rome, the city, the culture. So don't take this the wrong way, because I do think that this has so much to offer. However, I think the structure and her writing style wasn't working that well. I think she had, for example, a style where she would introduce a chapter, she would tell you everything that would happen in that chapter pretty much, and then she would actually start the story. So she would go back and start from the beginning. She also focuses a lot on Rome, the city, which is fair enough, it's what the book is about. But I think somehow when I picked this up, I had a misconception, and I thought that this was about the Roman Empire. And when she was telling us about emperors and their lives, I was extremely fascinated, and then she would maybe just brush that off, or just barely touch upon one emperor, which I would love to know more, like Nero, for example. There is not much about Nero in here at all, or actually even the fire that destroyed parts or most of Rome. And then she tackles issues about the market, or how people lived in Rome, which is as important, but not necessarily what I was looking for. Something that I would have wished, basically vice versa. I wish she had spent more time on the lives of emperors or the conquests, and less time, no time, but less time on everyday life. Also because I think that everyday life is very difficult to actually know with accuracy. Like, yeah, you can speculate based on scripture you find and artifacts that you find, but it is a speculation, while the emperors and their deeds were more written in history. There are more texts about them and so on. She does, though, speaks about the Republic and then how it goes into the emperor and Caesar, so it was packed with a lot of things and I learned a lot of things. However, the way it was done and structured and how detailed it was on things that I personally at times didn't find that interesting also made me realize that I didn't retain that many information from these that I wish I had, because I should have learned a bunch of stuff. And when I am engrossed in a non-fiction, I do learn so much from it. And in these, I don't think I did learn that much. Like, I don't remember exactly like how society works, because I don't know, something of a writing style. So she's definitely an historian. She's an amazing historian. A writer, a bit less. In my opinion. Yeah, I would have loved to hear probably her having lecture and just speaking, but reading about the way she writes about stuff sometimes doesn't click with me that well. And before I put this down, I'm gonna start mentioning number 8 because it was Iron Gold by Pierce Brown, the beginning of the second trilogy in this space opera. And I have read Red Rising, I think, last year, and then continue on this year, and now I listen to these as well. Then there is another book out already, and then one that's about to come out, I believe. I'm keeping these in my hands because clearly a lot of things about this culture are inspired by Roman culture, from the names and some of the structure of how, you know, the politics works in these are clearly inspired by the Roman Empire. So I was just wondering if you know if the story is kind of following as well the Roman Empire history. Or maybe it's just all in my head and it's just inspired by culture, but it's nothing to do with the actual history of the Roman Empire. I don't know, honestly, if a continuation of Red Rising, the first trilogy, was needed. I'm not complaining though, because the guy is a master when it comes down to write space opera, and I never cared much about sci-fi, and I do care about this series quite a lot, as majority of us do. So I'm not complaining, but I am complaining actually about one thing, or maybe a couple. First of all is how dumb Darrow was in these. Like, I struggled to reconcile the idea of Darrow I had in my head with what he's doing now. I do understand that there is a time gap, you know, when we continue on the book. It's been 10 years pretty much since the events of Morning Star. However, I was just like, what happened in those 10 years? How did you become dumb? And I had to stomach Lysander, which it was difficult. But I do really appreciate what the author does, what Mr. Brown again does in these, which is we follow both sides, which makes the whole thing more real, more realistic, and also more hurtful, because there are two sides to each story. And the way Mr. Brown explores how things are perceived depending on where you stand, it's remarkably well done. So yeah, continue on with these. I am eager to continue on, but I am absolutely terrified of what's gonna happen next. I did like the two new characters. I mean, they really grew on me, because initially we follow different point of views in this one, which we don't, or not that much in the first trilogy, and I was like, I don't care that much. But then Lyria and Ephron really grew on me by the end, so I am curious to see what happens to them. I just know that my heart is gonna break over and over again, and I need to be ready for that when I continue on. Okay, and number 7 I have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Yes, if you have heard me speak about this before, especially my TBR, when I gave you the synopsis, I was spoiled about what happens in this book by the afterword in a book by T. Fisher, I think it's the name of the author. I recently read her like new release, which was this, and on almost new release, I think now she has put up another book. And in the afterword, because that is a retelling of the Fall of the House of Usher by Poe, she then explores the idea behind the retelling, and she does spoil Mexican Gothic in the afterword, she will find out that I do hold a grudge. And I'm not happy that she spoiled that in the afterword. I just don't understand why. So basically I was spoiled about these. I knew what was a big deal behind these. And so I was on the lookout for indeed what actually happens in these, which I won't tell you because I won't do that disservice to you guys. This was it reminded me a lot of classic horror. It reminded me a lot of Poe stories, and it reminded me also a bit of The Haunting of Hill House, which is something I really enjoy. Both Poe and The Haunting of Hill House. I absolutely loved those classic horror literature books. I like the character of Francis, and I really liked how this ends. I think for the genre it was very refreshing. Yes, it was a bit slow. I think it wasn't the most action-packed horror, but again, as those classic horror that I just mentioned aren't, sometimes the atmosphere that you create is enough to keep the tension going, and so I really appreciate the tension. No, I wasn't scared, but I was definitely feeling the oppression, and I was feeling what the main character was feeling pretty well. So yeah, I really appreciated this, and will check out more by the author in the future. The next one is gonna make people mad for how low in the list it is. And it's pretty low considering how popular this book is. However, I actually think I was almost generous to put this where it is. Ultimately, I think this is the right place, but definitely not more than these. Number 6, I do have Jade City by Fonda Lee, which is a book that have taken the internet and the, I don't know, the book community by storm. And everybody loves this trilogy. Everybody is now, I've heard people spending so much money on like the novella as a follow-up novella, and I'm a book collector. I do understand spending a lot of money on a book that you love. I hoped though that I would love this as much as everybody else and their mothers did, and I didn't. Don't get me wrong, I think this is a very good fantasy. I don't think it's stellar fantasy. I don't think this is the best or the most exciting book I've read, definitely not this year. And I am someone who grew up playing The Godfather on PlayStation. I watched all the movies. Clearly I'm Italian, so sometimes I felt like, you know, it was a bit, I need to know what The Godfather is. Basically, somehow, I don't know, I need to keep stereotypes up. So I do have a fairly informed background on mafia stories, how it works, actually how the real mafia works, because I did read some non-fiction about the mafia. I grew up with the news about the mafia in Italy and so on. So I do really get the inspiration behind these, although I do not know how the Yakuza works or anything of the sort. The only thing I know are related to Italian mafia, not of course other types of mafia around the world. However, I wished in a sense that this was just a gangster book, and the fantasy element is what actually I don't think works that well. I did grow more used to it. However, I think she does very well the characters. I was very attached to most of the characters, but you can see that this is, you know, an early fantasy for the author, and I explain why. For example, she uses some legends, and then she would use that legend in the actual plot, like something, you know, it's a historical legend about someone doing something great, and then our main protagonist would do something similar. Now, if you had made more build up of that, so if you had put the legend at some point in the story and then developed the story, and then at the end, or when big things happen, the characters did what the legend or the people from the legend did, it would have worked way better. Instead, what she does is a lot of events happen out of the blue, which is fine because I understand that, you know, attacks and gangster and stuff like that. However, it can go from dull, and then there is a bit something happening out of the blue. Some of the justification or some of the way things happen are a bit convenient at times, in my opinion, and then she just puts the legend up and just say, oh, this is what happened in the legend, and in the next chapter the characters do that thing and mention the legend, but you know, this is toward the end, has not been done since the beginning, so there is no like, oh, this is what he did. Like, it's clearly doing what the chapter before this in the legend, the character in that legend was doing. I think the suspense could have been built way more, the story could have been structured in a different kind, and it would have worked for me personally way more than actually did. So yeah, basically this is me saying that I've read other fantasies that use the devices in the plot in a way that I personally think works best, or works best for me. The payoff of that build-up I didn't feel it because of the way it was done, basically, in these. I particularly like the character of Hilo, and I do want to see what happens next. So eventually I will continue on. I purchased the second book, so I will continue on, but I'm not in a particular rush. And then I read the second book for our book club pick, which was On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous. Because both books we had picked were quite short and we meet every 2 months, we decided to read 2. But actually some of us failed to read these, so we're gonna have another meeting about this one, but I'm gonna wrap it up now for you guys because I did read this month. It's a non-fiction, and it's the author writing a very deeply personal letter about his experience growing up, moving from Vietnam to USA during the war, or I think it was during the war that they moved, and writing to his mother, with whom he had like a very rocky relationship, a very strong bond at the same time. And I must say that I really admire the author for daring to become, or to be so bare, so naked and vulnerable in this story. And it's very difficult for people to open up to these degrees everywhere, even with your best friend or partner or, you know, mother. And I can only imagine how difficult this could have been to do, like thinking this is a book that everybody's gonna pick up and read about and, you know, explore parts that are so deep, that are so vulnerable again. So I really kind of want to say thank you to the author for letting us see that, because it takes a lot of courage and you have to be very brave to open up like he did in these. You can tell that he's a poet, and the writing sometimes is it's beautiful writing, but it's very abstract at times, and I had to stop and read sentences over and over again, trying to really grasp what it was meaning. A couple of times probably I failed. However, this book was an experience in itself. It was deeply touching and disturbing at times, and saddening. It was discombobulated, messy at times, but it was truly something that I'm so grateful that I did get around to read and experience. And I might reread it in a while when I'm okay with it, just to understand more about it and understand more of what he means with his writing, which is so gorgeous but also difficult at times to interpret. The next 2 ones, actually, quality-wise, would be at the very top. I think for a reader of fantasy, high fantasy, as I am, is one of my favorite genre ever. These are masterpiece, the next ones that are about to come. So number 4, I do have The Ninth Reign. Everybody has been screaming about this and how good it was, and indeed it was that good. This reminded me a lot of classic fantasies, but with a very fresh writing. I had a few laughs and absolutely loved to explore the lore and get to know these characters. Not too many characters as of now, which allowed me to really grow attached to them, where we follow mainly 3/2 of them, and just the adventure we go on trying to figure out what is the nature of some of the enemies of this world, where they're coming from, that side of a quest to explore artifacts, and just the themes of these really worked wonderfully for me. I immediately, sorry, the door opened because of the wind. It really reminded me of some video games that I used to love, like Dragon Age. In terms of the environment that we explore, there is a good amount of action, there is a good amount of, characters just getting to know each other. We explore the world, the lore, so many things for to explore and to find out in the next books. I was so excited at the end, without giving any spoilers, but that was amazing when it happened. The build up, the way this was structured was extremely good in my opinion, and I immediately went and bought the sequels just because, and I don't do that often, if ever, because I want to continue on. I want to be in this world. Felt like so cozy, and it has been a long while since I got so excited about a high fantasy that feels very classic but unique at the same time. And yeah, it's actually like something that I really cherish, and I can't wait to continue on with the series and see where this is going. Number 3 is the book that probably quality-wise would be at the top. Like, undeniably, this is the best storytelling that I have experienced in a long while, but also like this month, 100%. And this is the second part of Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. I had read the first book a couple of months ago, and then the first part. In England they just separated the book. I don't know why, because honestly the first book is a setup for this one, and this one was epic, and altogether was epic. This is epic high fantasy, and I think this is something that, because I read these, for example, before I read J.City, I couldn't help having standards for J.City or any other fantasy, to be fair, that were a reflection of what these gave me. The way Sanderson develops its plots is amazing. He gives us crumbles, he gives us like some things here and there, and then he leaves it, and then the story builds and builds and builds, and then the final scenes happen and it becomes epic because we put everything together, everything comes together in an explosive ending, which is what I love about this book particularly. This is how you build epicness. In my opinion, this is what works for me, is a kind of slow events, and you really get into the lives of this character. You really take your time with it, and then when things happen, I was screaming. So yeah, loved this so much. Shellan forever. She is my favorite one, and also what has been created here, what I can feel it's coming here. I am like already devastated, because how could that ever go well? I don't know. I've heard that the next book follows more Dalinar, really? Dalinar, how you pronounce it. But yeah, looking forward to continue on. Again, in England they split them in 2 parts, which is very annoying, but I do think honestly that they need to be read back to back, because I think the author meant for them to be read back to back, and so I don't want to make a disservice to him again and split them. So we'll try to get Oathbreaker in at the same time, like reading first part and second part back to back whenever that is. I have to say that even if I do take a break with this series, it's so unique and it's so well done that it really sticks with me, so I can take a break and I would remember most of the things happening. And number 2, I have The Female of a Species. This is a literature fiction contemporary YA story, and you follow a girl whose sister has been sexually assaulted and killed by a predator, and she wants revenge. I think I don't want to say anything else, because for me to give you the real plot of this, it's a spoiler. Although when you open this up and you read the first chapters, you understand what this is about. This was unique, and it destroyed me. The writing style and these 3 POVs that we follow, and especially Alex, our main protagonist, so the sister of a girl that got killed, was so devastating for me to read. I loved everything about these. It's a very weird one though, and I do understand why these might not work for everyone. But as someone who was, for example, absolutely loved Sadie, that kind of YA, very dark contemporary story, I adored this as well. It's a very different story, and the plot develops in a very weird way, which is highly unrealistic that this was ever to happen. However, the writing style makes it feel very real, like the way these young people communicate and engage with each other. So that side of the story, I work with teens. Although this was written a few years back, I could see some realistic elements of how teens speak with each other, despite the events in this being unrealistic. The reason why this is so high is because I was utterly devastated by this book, and I was actually feeling things, and I was actually visibly upset. And the last time, or the only times actually, that I felt those emotions for a book, where I felt that upset reading a book, can count them on the fingers of one hand, and all of those books have become my very favorite books ever. And I think like the writing style of this, when you read, or if you've read The Fault in Our Stars, that is a very dark contemporary sad story, it felt that kind of direct, impactful writing that I had experienced there in a story that's even more bleak, maybe more bleak, I don't know, it's more thriller if you want. So it's that kind of really straight to your core, punch in the gut kind of writing and protagonist that really sipped with me. I do recognize that this book probably has faults in the plot itself and how, again, far-fetched it was. However, I don't care. She really packed a punch with this with me, and I want to check out way more by her. I absolutely love the writing style and what she does with her plots and her characters. I'm curious to see how this translates in other stories by her. Listen, before I go into number 1, I'm gonna try not to ramble too much. And I'm not gonna justify myself for putting these at number one, because I already told you a million times, quality wise this would be different, this wouldn't be a number one. I do recognize that quality wise this is not even comparable, not even in the same planet as World of Radiance. But however, the only book this month that I had to read in 24 hours because I couldn't stop is this one. And is one that is gonna shock you, as it shocked me, because I didn't think I would have loved this so much. I just received it in the post. I had heard people raving about this and like, I'm probably gonna hate it, but let me try. I love the cover. They look so stunning. And when I picked it up, opened the first chapter, the rest was history for the next 24 hours. And this is Broken Bonds by J. Bree. I don't know, I think this is self-published, I believe, although I wouldn't be surprised if this is soon picked up by an actual publisher, because people have been raving about these. This is a new adult, it's for adults content. It's about this girl that she's on the run from her bonds. The way this world works, you have like someone can have more than one bond, kind of mate if you want, and when they bond, so when they have sex, their powers are enhanced. However, she's on the run because she doesn't want to mate with these bonds, and she has got 5 of them. They are kind of like soulmates, and it's like a reverse harem situation where she can be with all of them. She doesn't have to choose one of them. However, she does need to have relationships with them in order for, you know, all of the parties involved to have their powers enhanced. But she doesn't want that because we don't know exactly what her power is, but she doesn't want it unleashed. And so she's running away from them, but then they catch up with her and they take her to this university, school, college for people that have powers, and she has to stick there with them and deal with them while trying to keep them awake. Now, thing that I really like, it's a reverse harem. I don't know why, because I would never do it in real life. Like, it's not something that it appeals to me in real life. However, it's kind of my guilty pleasure when it comes down to reading books or anime or manga. Like, I loved the premise of these, and yes, this is problematic. Yes, a lot of these guys in this bond are douches and they are horrible, and there is a scene that it's very problematic in these. I don't think the author though is making excuses for it, and I think the protagonist, she has a mouth on her. There is a lot of swearing in this, but I also felt like she was generally angry at the situation, and so the anger would come out and she would say fuck, fuck, fuck all the time. But because she was generally angry, and so I really kind of clicked with the protagonist, because despite this world, which is absurd, whatever is happening is absolutely ridiculous in a sense, but it's also like realistic the way she's reacting to it, and she's acknowledging that these guys are douches and then what they're doing is not right. And the fact that this is an apologetic toxic in a sense, I liked it, because I had some other like dark romances where I hated the dark romances because the protagonist was like, oh, he's doing that, but he's doing it just for protecting me, I love it so much. And then she's like, no, he's a piece of shit, like he's doing it because he's, you know, something's off in his brain. And so I really liked how he took those toxic behaviors from these guys and realistically looked at them like, no, this is fucked up. And so that's why probably I clicked with her so much. I also felt like someone who's struggled as a young person, you know, money-wise and without a family. I could relate to her on a like that kind of thing. And so, I don't know, I just clicked with the main protagonist. I love how she's taking these guys on and how she's just like, just saying what she thinks and reacting to them in a way that I find it healthy in a very toxic situation. And I don't do drugs, but apparently I do this, where this is constant things happening, constant sexual tension, and then hate, and then action, and then magic. It really, really works. And again, I'm gonna be unapologetic in saying that I immediately ordered the sequels, and I am planning to have like marathons of them, because this is addictive and I need to get through this, otherwise I can't think of anything else. I absolutely adored these with all its problems. I also enjoy her writing style. I just find that it's so easy to digest. I love the main protagonists, and I do love the guys, although I want to strangle some of them and she wants to strangle some of them. I think like we think similarly. It's a guilty pleasure. I loved it though, and I had to put this in number one place because I can't remember the last time that I opened up a book and I forgot about sleep or life until I was done. And this reminded me of when I was a teen, devouring books in this way, finding some of my favorite books at the time in this way. And I had thought that I was too old to enjoy or get engrossed in a book like I did, and apparently I was wrong. This taught me that I can be a young girl again, loving literature as much as I do, for how problematic that is. Thank you guys, this was all for this month. I read so much, so many 5 stars for different reasons, and I absolutely had a blast. Looking forward to next month, but let me know what was your favorite book of the month, and if you're new, I would love for you to subscribe, so hit the button down below. I'll see you next time. Take care of yourself. Ciao!